Okay.
Yep.
Good afternoon, everyone. Parsha Noso is the longest parsha in the Torah and contains certain sections regarding certain groups of the Jewish people. The first section, which I'm going to discuss with you in a few minutes, here's how to deal with the Leviim. The second section has to do with the Nesiim, who were the princes of Israel and who brought their separate korbanos to the Chanukah Samizbeach. And then we have to look at the Jewish people generally, because we are embarking already on the narrative of the last 38 years in the desert. As at this moment, this week's parsha, the Jewish people are 11 days in close to Eretz Yisrael, and seemingly they are going to go directly there. There is no hesitation. And in next week's parsha, we will already begin to see the story unravel. They fall into difficulties and doubts and sins and troubles. And it ends up that that generation never is privileged to come to Eretz Yisrael. So there are different sections of the Jewish people that are under discussion here in this Chumash Bamidbar. Usually we view the Jewish people as a whole, but we all know that it is comprised of individuals and of groups, and that the individuals and groups have a great effect upon what happens to the whole, and therefore we have to examine more minutely the situation than just looking at the general count. So the Torah begins to say, "Nasoas Rosh, Bnei Gershon, Gam Heim LeMishpachosayim." And the phrase "Nasoas Rosh," to raise the head. So in the context that we have in the parsha, it means that we're going to count them. But it also means we're going to instruct them. What is their mission? What is their task? What they are supposed to do? And the three families of the Leviim, Gershon, Kahat, and Merari, each had their own individual missions, what they had to do to carry out the avodah, the work that had to be done in the Mishkan and later in the Beit HaMikdash. So you have here established for the first time what we would call, in today's terms, a civil service. People who are, so to speak, nonpartisan, who have a specific governmental role. And their role remains, no matter who the government is. The Leviim remained the Leviim, no matter who was the head of Klal Yisrael. No matter who was the king or who was later in the Bayis Sheni, the ruler. The Leviim remained the Leviim. So how did they become Leviim? So this I've mentioned to you many times. They became Leviim because they responded to Moshe at the time of the Egel. Moshe announced in the camp, Mila Hashem Eloi, whoever is for God, let him come to me. Let's stop the plague of the Avodah Zorah, of the Egel. Let's defeat the Erev Rav. So it says, Vayikalu Elov Kol B'nei Levi. So only the Leviim came, the tribe of Levi. Now the tribe of Levi produced Moshe and Aaron. And the tribe of Levi, according to the Medrash, when the Jewish people were in Mitzrayim, so they were also set aside. They were, so to speak, the clergy. And they didn't do any of the heavy work. The Egyptians, so to speak, excused the tribe of Levi. And before she point out that the tribe of Levi is relatively few in number, it's the smallest of all the tribes. The others are 40,000, 50,000, even 60,000. Levi's been the early 20,000s. So the Meforshim say that's because they didn't work in Egypt. It says, Kasher Yadu Oson Ken Yirbu V'Chen Yifratz. According to the persecution, the Jewish people were numerous. Since they were not persecuted, so the bracha did not happen to them. And therefore they remained a relatively small tribe. But they were naturally of great influence because all of the leaders of Israel came from the tribe of Levi. Aaron HaKohen was the leader in Mitzrayim, and then Moshe Rabbeinu was the leader the entire time in the desert. And later on, Shmuel Hanavi was also from the tribe of Levi, who was the last of the judges and the greatest of the judges. And so the Leviim are an elite group, special group. That's why it says, Nosoes Rosh, raise their head. You have to raise their head that they should understand that they're special, that they're chosen for this mission. They should not regard it lightly. They should bear their heads high, so to speak, because they are the elite tribe amongst all the tribes of the Jewish people. Now, Meforshim point out that if we looked at Chumash Bereshis at the end, and especially if we looked at the words of Yaakov Avinu before he departed from the world, he had harsh things to say about Levi. Shimon v'Levi achimein, klei chomos mecheroseim, violent people, v'sodom al tovo nafshi, I don't want to be part of them. V'koholam al teichat kvodi, I don't want my honor, I don't want to be mentioned with them. And we see that that was fulfilled because when Korach comes on the scene, it says Korach ben Yitzhor ben Kohos, ben Levi, but it doesn't say ben Yaakov. But Yaakov didn't want to be affiliated with it. So on one hand, they are apparently the most despised of all of the Shvatim. Because even though Reuven is not complimented, but he is not written off the way Levi is. Chazal point out that many times greatness comes from the depths of despair, from the depths of sin even. And that, because that provides, it's always a balance scale, so the lower one sinks, so the higher one can go. And Levi is the example, therefore, that even though they were not blessed by their father, and they were, so to speak, written out in a book, don't mention me with them. You know, there were Jews that were communists or atheists or other deviationists. So those who had a conscience changed their last name because they didn't want that their Zeta should have to be associated with it. So, for instance, in South Africa, the head of the Communist Party, who was a Jew, so he was a direct descendant of one of the great Rabbonim of Eastern Europe. So he changed his name so that it was not recognizable, except if you figured it out. But he didn't want to drag his Zeta down with it. And here Yaakov tells them in advance, don't take me out with you. But because of that, Levi took it to heart. Levi said, how could it be? How could it be that I should be part of and that my grandfather should be ashamed of me? My father, I can't let it rest at that. And therefore, the Levium devoted themselves more than any other tribe to the service of the Jewish people and the service of the Rebbeinu Shalom. And therefore, when the moment of crisis came, and Moshe said, Mila Hashem Eloi, who is for God, let him come to me. So they came. Because they always had the impulse to redeem themselves, to raise themselves from the level of that I don't want to be part of. I don't want my name mentioned with you. Now, the Levium did not have a share in Eretz Yisrael. It says, Hashem unachalosam. Their share is serving God. But they didn't have any physical share in Eretz Yisrael. We read in Tanakh and we read in the Talmud, the Levium had 48 cities scattered throughout the country. 4 cities from each of the tribes, and those were the Ari Levium. And the Levium worked in the Beit HaMikdash year round, and they were the Mishorerim and they were the Shoarim. They were the choir, they were the orchestra, they were the maintenance people, they were the gatekeepers. But more than that, they were the teachers of the Jewish people. The Levians throughout the period, especially of Bayis Rishon, they were the teachers of the Jewish people. And that's why they were scattered throughout the country. And the same thing with Shevet Shimon, their brother, that also fell under the same criticism from Yaakov. So the Gemara says that the Shevet Shimon were the school teachers. And they never really took hold of it, even though they had a share in the land of Israel, the tribe of Shimon. But they never really settled it. They never really took hold. So part of them were absorbed in Shevet Binyamin, and part of them were absorbed in the north in Shevet Dan. They really didn't have an independent entity. Because again, they're the civil service. They're the school teachers. They're the educators. They're not the farmers. They're not the artisans. They're not the ones that are engaged in commerce. So the Torah wanted that the Levium should understand their role. Everyone has to appreciate that they have a special role. The problem in life many times is that we try to fulfill a role that doesn't fit us. We're not cut out for it. That was not my task. Famous story with the Beis HaLevi, that there was a very wealthy Jew in Brisk, in Slutsk, I think, when he was the Rav. And this very wealthy Jew sat in the shul every day, and he said, he recited the entire book of Tehillim. But he was a miser. Didn't contribute money to anything. The Beis HaLevi once went to him, and he said, you know, the Jewish people are like an army. So some people are in the infantry, and some people are the Air Force, and some people are the artillery. Everybody, if you're in the artillery, you cannot behave like you're an infantryman. The army will collapse. It won't work. He said, I have hundreds of people who can sit and say Tehillim all day. But you're the only one that can support the community. So by your sitting and saying Tehillim, you are doing us a disservice, not a service. Because you're not fulfilling your mission. You're not doing what you're supposed to do. So all of us have that. And the Levim are the example of it. The Levim are also in charge of the Orei Miklot, the cities of refuge. So they were in charge of the rehabilitation of people. Criminals, murderers. The Levim undertook that. So we see that the Levim are this special group within Klal Yisrael. And that's why the Torah says, no, so raise their heads. They're special people. Tell them. Make sure they fulfill that. Because of the fact that that is necessary in order for Klal Yisrael to develop correctly, and necessary for the Levim themselves to fulfill their role. Rabbi Hanania ben Akash Omer, HaKadosh Baruch Hu L'Zakos Es Yisrael, V'ficham Chibur Lahem Torah Mitzvot, She'namar, Adonai Chafetz U'Mam Tzidko Yadil Torah V'Yadil.